mentioning here is that at a certain point, there is an opportunity for you to do these adjustment layers, but sometimes it can be too much. You don't want to do more than 3 adjustment layers on any one photograph because you can often do many things with just one adjustment layer. So for me, my go-to adjustment layer is not brightness contrast, is not hue saturation, but it is the curves adjustment. So in this tutorial, we're going to talk about how to use the curve adjustment layer and how you can really affect a lot of different parts in your image based on contrast, color, brightness, all of these things that we utilize, but to do it in a way that's customizable, that's personal to you. So I'm just going to shift click and select these 2 adjustment layers and drag them to the trash. Starting from scratch, I'm going to click the curves adjustment layer, and here is our curves adjustment. Now this is really interesting because we see the histogram of the photograph. So we know that we can adjust this image based on where our information begins and where it ends. Our information starts with the darkest values and ends with the brightest values. And you can see here that we have a gap between the start of our image and where those brightest values come in. So if I just click and move this to the left, you can see how that has addressed a lot of these underexposure issues that are part of this photograph because there was no pure white in our image. The other thing that I can do is adjust my overall exposure based on the midtones, the highlights, or the shadows. If I click along this diagonal line, it'll drop a point. If I drag that point up, it will affect my midtones. If I drag that down, it will affect my midtones as well by darkening them. If I want to affect the highlights more than the midtones, I can drag this up. But the interesting and the most effective part of curves and using this diagonal is dropping more than one point. If I come down to the shadowed areas and I pull those down, notice that the highlights are anchored in place and are no longer moving. Let me just delete that by hitting the delete key, that point, and go back and click on this point. You can see that the whole diagonal is moving. But then if I drop another point, it anchors here, and as I'm dragging down, I can add contrast. Basically, I'm making the shadows darker and then the highlights brighter, and you can see as a result higher contrast is achieved. For the diagonal, we can see that it is creating an S shape. An S shape in our diagonal means contrast. If we do the opposite of an S, here if I pull the highlights down and bring the shadows up, you can see as a result I get a low contrast image. I'll just hit the delete key on both of these. So now I just want to subtly add effective contrast here by bringing in that subtle S curve. And remember, it's just about the subtleties of our edit. I could do a third point if I need to by affecting the midtones, but you don't want to make sure you don't do more than 2 or 3 points, because more than that you won't get the fluidity of the gradual shifts from the highlights to the shadows to the midtones that you need for the image to look effective and natural. So only subtle changes will do, but they go a really long way.